Welcome, everyone, to the White Rabbit Podcast. I am your co-host, Matt Kraus, coming to you from Bandırma, Turkey. And the other half of this podcast is Alper Rosanes. Hi, Alper.
Hi. It feels like it's been a while, although it hasn't.
Yeah, it feels like it's been a while, although it has not been a while, but it does feel like it's been a while. So, Alper, I've got this real-life situation that I want to run by you. And I want to hear what you think about it. Does
Is
that
it
sound
one
okay?
of those therapy sessions?
Maybe so. We'll see at the end.
Let's see.
Okay. So first, when I was going through this situation, I thought that this had nothing to do with anything except for itself. But then later, I was thinking about it and I realized, no, it has a lot to do with presentations. You know, we talk about stuff like this all the time here on the podcast. So let me tell you the situation. So here's the situation. I've got this cousin and, he lives in California. And I know for a fact that he never listens to this podcast. In fact, he probably doesn't even know that it exists. So we're pretty safe.
So we can talk pretty openly here.
Yeah, we're pretty safe and anonymized here. We can talk
Okay.
openly, definitely. And plus, I have a lot of cousins. And so it would be really hard to pin down which one of them it is. So, okay, so here we
I
go.
think he knows himself, and it's always a he, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, he has a group of friends and family, me included, of course, since I'm a cousin. And so let's call them Group B, this group of friends and family. Let's call them Group B. So
Group A being?
pardon me?
Group A would be who?
Oh, Group A, which I'm not going to use. I'm just going to call him my cousin. Group A is my cousin, but
Okay.
I'm just going to call him my cousin. So there are two parties here. There's my cousin and there's Group B.
Okay.
So I guess I should have a Group A in there somewhere, or at least a person.
Common sense, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that would be common sense. But no one has ever accused me of having common sense. So okay, so we'll call them Group B. So there's my cousin and Group B. Those are the two players here. So for over a year, my cousin has been complaining about the actions of Group B, and their actions, which to me and probably to most of the other members of Group B, those actions seem completely normal and warranted, because we understand them. So, so that's the setup. Cousin, California, he's having difficulties with his friends and family. I offered to help him figure out what's going on. And he, being a good sport, took me up on this offer. So here we are.
And somehow it's connected to presentations or public speaking or any topic.
we'll come around to that in a few minutes. But but yes, believe it or not, this is connected to presentations, and it is connected to what we discuss quite often here on the podcast.
Okay.
So at first, I approached it like this, like so. My cousin complains about Group B, and I tell him why Group B is doing what they're doing and how good their intentions are. Basically, Group B is only saying this, or Group A is only doing this because they love you and they want the best for you. That's basically what I'm saying.
Okay.
So, and initially I thought, wow, this approach is great and brilliant. Good job, Matt. And I'm patting myself on the back and feeling all good about myself. But then I actually try it, and it just results in these awful fights. And my cousin hates me. My cousin is getting mad at me. He can't stand me. But now, and I'm not a psychologist, believe it or not. I'm not a psychologist. So I'm kind of out of my depth here, and I don't really know what to say next. My cousin is mad at me. Things are breaking down. We're fighting all the time. I don't know what to do next. So I take a few days off and I think about it a bit. And when we come back at it again, because thank God, my cousin and I, we've known each other all our lives. We have a lot of trust in each other, and we have a lot of patience in each other. So, we come back and continue the conversation. And the second time around, I'm like, okay, shut up, Matt, and just ask questions and listen to him talk because his words are telling you how the world looks to him.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, I'm going to tell him my perspective on how he can go about fixing his relations with Group B because he asked me to do that. It's kind of my job here. But for now, I remind myself, okay, just shut up. You need to let him speak because even if this is not what he thinks he is doing, he's telling you how the world looks to him. And it occurs to me that as I listen to him talk, it occurs to me that if I saw the world the way that he's seeing it, first of all, I think the way that he's seeing the world is weird. But if I saw the world that way, I would act the exact same way that he is. So he's just acting in accordance to the way he's seeing the world. So, I remind myself, Matt, you can't help your cousin repair his relations with Group B unless you understand how he is seeing the world. So
Fair
I
enough.
don't know what to do with that actually, but it occurs to me that we talk about this on the podcast all the time. You know, Group A, the presenter, and Group B, the audience, and maybe they don't see the world the same way. And so what should the presenter do? And this is a recurring podcast topic. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking I should run this by Alper and see what he says. So what do you think of that?
Okay. Well, thank you first of all for running this by me, and now I see the connection. I mean, not just because you mentioned it, but I was already taking some notes that were relevant. And yes, indeed, it seems like a presenter versus standing in front of a group of people who might be seeing the world differently. And yes, there are there are a lot of similarities. If you came to me and didn't mention your cousin, didn't mention the family dynamics, didn't mention your relationship with him, I think, and if you completely portrayed it as from a presentation perspective, I would say, okay, imagine this. You make a presentation and in the audience, there is someone who is maybe fidgeting in his seat, who is maybe uncomfortable with the worldview that you're portraying, and he raises his hand to ask you a question. And let's assume, for the sake of argument, that you already know what the question is going to be and you already have the answer. What would you do? Would you just tell him, hey, okay, I know the rest of your question. Here is the answer. Or would you wait for him?
Well, I would be tempted to just jump in
Yes,
and just
but
answer the question right there. But I would try, hopefully I would be successful, but I would try to restrain myself and just shut up and let him finish asking the question.
exactly. I think that will be the wise move. And I understand and appreciate how challenging and difficult it would be. In that regard, I would like to invoke one of the best advice I ever received from a manager in my life who said, you need to bite your tongue if necessary and keep your mouth closed.
Oh, okay.
So in that regard, maybe the person just wants to blow off some steam. Maybe he needs to feel that he's understood and heard before you can dispense useful information that would make even his life
Ooh, that's a
better.
good point. I hadn't thought of that before. What you're saying kind of reminds me. A couple years ago, we had a guest on the podcast a couple times, Jonathan Stark. Do you remember him?
Yes, of course.
Jonathan Stark. Yeah. So, and one of the things that he says in this context, he's talking about customer meetings. When you go visit a customer and you're finding out how much the project is worth to them and all that stuff. So one of the things he says is that you just need to let the customer, or in this case, the audience member, do a word dump, basically. Just
Exactly,
whatever is in there, just let them let it out. Even if you know what they're going to say next, let them let it out because they need to let it out. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a beautiful way of putting it, the word dump. But at the same time, I think it's important to remain cautious because you don't want the word dump to turn into an emotional dump that will take the next 15, 20 minutes, isolate everyone else in the audience, and turn it into a one-on-one with this particular person asking the question.
Okay, so let me ask you about this in a presentation context. So I'm standing up there in front of the room. Let's say it's a boardroom. I'm standing up there in front of these, 10 or 12 or whatever board members. And one of them is the CFO of the company. And the CFO of the company is asking me some questions. Is what you're talking about here is that the CFO becomes kind of hostile and wants to kind of hijack the two-way conversation? Is that what you're talking about?
I don't think a CFO would have the desire to become hostile and hijack the conversation unless we're talking some deep rooted issues which are beyond the scope of this podcast. But in a situation like that, I think it would be important to keep in mind the goal of the gathering and to make live checks, like on the spot, to make live checks as to whether this disturbance, let's say, or the slightly aggressive questioning is conducive to reaching that goal or not. Because you can always fall back to the argument and say, hey, I understand your point, but what you are the argument that you're invoking right now is beyond the scope of this presentation or this conversation that we came here today to discuss. I will be more than happy to speak about that, after the meeting is over or in a follow-up conversation. But that would be defeating the purpose of today's meeting.
So let me see if I get what you're saying. So for the presentation context, there are kind of two pieces of concrete advice here. One is that if somebody is asking a question, resist the urge to jump in and say, I know what you're about to say. Here's the answer. So resist that urge. That's the first part. And the second part is that if somebody in the audience kind of hijacks the presentation and hijacks the conversation and wants to make it just a one-to-one kind of thing, say the following words. This is outside of the scope of this presentation, but I would be happy to discuss it with you afterwards. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, and I have a feeling that we already talked about this in another episode because I can feel the same energy vibrating. So yeah, I mean, but for that, I don't know if I mentioned this in the other episode, but for that, it's important to have the scope of the meeting like rock solid, like to know what you're going to talk about, to know what the outcome is going to be, and to work towards that. Because if you don't know that, you cannot claim the argument of let's say, the moral high ground of telling the other person that this is beyond the scope. If you don't have a scope, if you don't have boundaries of the argument, then there's nothing to compare it with.
Okay. And as we're talking about this, one of the other conversations that comes to mind, one of the other podcast episodes that comes to mind, recently we had a guest on the podcast named Nick Richmeyer. And he talked about how it's not good enough anymore to just do what I call the three questions, one of them being, what do I want the audience to do? Nick was saying that it's not enough to just ask, what do I want the audience to do? You've got to think about the broader milieu or the broader environment that the audience members are existing in, and not just something simplistic like, this is the company CFO, this is what he'll be interested in. So Nick was saying that you've got to think of the broader milieu or the broader environment that the audience members are in. What do you think about that? Would you sign on to that?
I agree with that, and that's why I try to invoke the argument of the live scanning. Like, you're the presenter, you're the speaker, it is your duty, I believe, that you make a live scan of the room, like, constantly. And decide which arguments to enter, which debates to enter, which interactions, let's say, between you and one of the listeners merit further discussion at that point, at that particular moment, or maybe postpone it for a future conversation.
Okay.
So yeah, since, I mean, as you are the presenter, you have the responsibility, I think, to gauge that and to take matters into your hand if necessary. Again, I highly doubt, I mean, if you're speaking in a room where the sea level is present, I don't think it will ever come to that, but you never know. I mean, people can bring all sorts of emotional baggage or garbage into any room for that matter.
Of course. Okay. So also today, I wanted to mention a contrarian opinion that I have, but before I do that, I want to see, do you feel wrapped up on this? Are you ready to move on?
I will be ready to move on once I ask, so what happened with the cousin? Did you have the conversation?
Well, we're still in the middle of it. With the cousin, I had the first conversation, which resulted in a lot of fighting. And then I had the realization that maybe I should like cut this cousin some slack and listen to him. And we haven't come to the next stage yet, or at least we just barely began the next stage, which is where Matt actually listens to his cousin. We've just had, these are Zoom calls, you know.
I was going to ask what medium you're using.
Yeah, we're using Zoom because, you know, I want the video in there so I can see his face. But, you know, in the old days, you could dramatically, you know, if you got angry in the old days, you could dramatically, you know, slam down the phone and show your anger. But with Zoom, all you could do is click the leave meeting button. It's just not the same. So
it's not the same.
My cousin was not able to adequately take his anger out on me.
Yeah, I think Jerry Seinfeld had made a comment on that when the iPhones came out. Like, you scream and yell, and then you're like,
yeah,
slide to hang up the phone. It's not the same.
It's not the same. Okay, so shall we
get
keep
us posted on what's going on between Turkey and California?
I will keep you posted. So, okay, so shall I get on to the contrarian opinion?
Let's go.
Okay. So the contrarian opinion, you know, today what we've been talking about, and, you know, we're presentation trainers, and part of the presentation training Bible is, you know, understand your audience, understand your audience, understand your audience. It's like, you know, and for good reason. It's our answer to pretty much everything. Understand your audience. So it's kind of like, you know, sacred in the presentation training world, that piece of advice. So,
and I have the feeling that you're going to punch holes in it right now.
Well, okay. So yes, you are correct. I'm about to punch holes in it.
Okay.
But I want to put a little disclaimer in here first. I want to remind everyone listening that this is just Matt being contrarian and asking Alper what he thinks. Okay, this is not Matt giving advice. I do not want anyone coming to me in a year saying my life is a disaster now.
I think you might be overestimating our reach.
Yeah. So, yeah. But anyway, I don't want anyone coming to me a year from now saying, Matt, I did what you told me and my life is a disaster now and it's all your fault. So I don't want anyone saying that. So keep in mind that this is not advice. This is just Matt being contrarian. Okay. So the contrarian opinion, you know, again, we're presentation trainers. And so our sacred answer to everything is, including what we're talking about today, is understand your audience. So my contrarian, well, I won't call it opinion anymore. I'll just call it question. Contrarian question is, what if we shouldn't try to understand our audience at all? And here's what I mean by that. And this is, so that's what I want to get your take on, but I'll tell you a little bit more about what I mean by that. Let's say, okay, I think of Tony Robbins. And Tony Robbins, like, I have never been to an actual Tony Robbins seminar. And I've never even read a Tony Robbins book. So all I know about Tony Robbins is basically that he's really tall and big and annoying. That's all I know. That's all I know about it. But so anyway, so that would be party A here is the Tony Robbins. You know who Tony Robbins is, right?
Can you imagine me saying no?
Okay. Yeah, I think everybody in the world knows who Tony Robbins is, except for maybe some starving kid in Africa. Okay. So, so people don't go to a Tony Robbins seminar because they want to hear their current mindset. They go to a Tony Robbins seminar because they want some transformation out of that mindset. They want to hear some other way of seeing the world. And so if Tony Robbins, if he got up there on stage, I'm not Tony Robbins, so I'm just speculating here, but I imagine that if Tony Robbins got up on stage and just said to the audience what was in their current mindset, if he spoke to them in their current mindset, he would have like no followers. But instead, people flock to these Tony Robbins seminars expecting some sort of magic transformation. So I'm wondering, am I misunderstanding what's going on here? Is Tony Robbins, is he understanding the audience in some way that Matt's not seeing? Or is there something going on here that Matt's not seeing? What do you think, Alper?
Yes. Any other questions?
No, but why don't you dig into that one a little bit more?
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't blame you because I think everything is open for questioning, including this almost biblical idea that we have as communication or presentation trainers, understanding your audience. And I want to open that a little bit. For example, when I talk about that, I'm not saying, okay, your audience sees the world. Let's say, let's touch on the example of your cousin. Your audience sees the world in point A, let's say. So you should adapt your message according to point A. You should craft your message according to point A. No, what I'm talking about when I use that argument, for example, and I use it as well, is understand whether your audience has a need or a want. Decipher that. Let's say your audience is currently at point A, but they want to go to point B. They want to end up in point B, and they don't know how to do that. And they're asking for help, or they're looking for advice on how to do that. So when I use the argument, for example, of understanding your audience, I don't mean it in a way that understand how your audience sees the world and deliver your message accordingly.
Okay.
It is part of it, but of course, there is no point in preaching to the choir. There is no point in reiterating to your audience what they already know or the way that they already see the world. However, if they have a desire to move from point A to point B, and you have been there before and you have moved from point A to point B, let's say, and you have helped a lot of people move from point A to point B, then yes, you can dispense your information, you can dispense your experience, and help them see that it is indeed possible to move from point A to point B. So in this regard, I think understanding your audience would be more than determining how they see the world and give them a vanilla message that doesn't offend that worldview, but understanding what they actually want to achieve and craft your message accordingly.
Okay, so let me see if I understand what you're saying. So you're thinking, don't try to be your audience, touch the part of your audience that wants something different.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, okay. You put that very elegantly, yes.
Okay, so that's kind of
But I think in order to do that, you kind of need to be your audience at least momentarily in the beginning. Otherwise, you might be perceived this person high up in the sky, dispensing information in arrogance or something like that. I mean, I think you said it very elegantly, and it requires that you put yourself, you make yourself perceived as one of them, and then maybe hold their hand to move them from point A to point B, which something, I repeat, you should have verified beforehand that they want to do. Otherwise, you would be speaking to a wall.
True. Okay, so we've kind of shot that contrarian opinion down. So my imagining that, hey, maybe Matt's going to destroy the world now and revolutionize, presentation training forever.
Again, overestimation.
I'm going to have to go back to
there seems to be a lot of them these days.
I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board for that one. If I want to revolutionize the presentation training industry, I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board. Okay. So,
and by the way,
uh,
in connection to this, I mean, I'm going to go back to your cousin in connection to this, because I just said, well, if the audience doesn't want to move from point A to point B, who are you to preach them? Let's go back to your cousin, for example. I'm assuming that he came to you with a request for advice so that you're having the conversation, albeit ending up with this arguments at this point.
yeah.
So that is the case, right?
Yeah, we're fighting. It's not going well,
Mm-hmm.
but there is a mutual desire to somehow stop fighting.
Okay.
There is that mutual desire.
And apart from that mutual desire, I'm assuming that you mentioned that he has like unstable relationships, let's say, with Group B, and he wants to improve those. That's why he's coming to you for advice. Did I get you correctly?
Yes, that is correct. That is correct.
Okay. Because otherwise it would be like you intervening in someone who is not asking for help in the first place.
Yeah, I was pretty careful about that at the beginning before we started, because I knew that, okay, if I just waltz in here with, advice, then even if I'm perfect,
unsolicited advice, yeah,
if I waltz in here with unsolicited advice, even if I'm perfect and deliver it awesomely, it's still never going to go well. He's always going to hate me. He's going to hate my guts. So in order to discuss this situation with him, in order to help him troubleshoot the situation, I had to let him give me permission to enter that space. I guess that's the way you could put it.
And you had the argument, even though you had the permission.
Even though I had permission to be there, we still ended up fighting, and he ended up hating me.
You gotta love human psychology.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. So on that note, shall we wrap it up here, or do you have?
We covered family psychotherapy. We covered shooting down contrarian questions. Anything else you would like to bring?
No, I think that's good. I feel all therapied out for right now.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Alper. Or should I call you doctor?
Well, not yet.
not yet. Okay. Well, for the meantime, thank you, Alper. And so Alper and I will see you on the next episode.
See you next episode. Bye-bye.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.